Yarns. I'm Marie.
And I'm Joyce.
Joyce, you all know her already and love her, I'm sure, because she brought you not only the Pan People, but our amazing felt dragon class. And she's been in the LivingFelt family for just a long, long time. We invited her into the LivingFelt studios this season to really give us a deep intro dive into spinning art yarns. And in this segment, Joyce is going to show us how to make her treasure yarns. We're actually going to spin this actual yarn that Joyce is holding right here. And tell us why you call them treasure yarns, Joyce.
So when I first started doing these, I was kind of like picking through all of my little leftover pieces from, you know, whatever I'm doing at the time, my projects, my classes, everything kind of just got dumped into a big bag. And I'm like, oh, this is just a mess. So you start picking through it, and I'm kind of like, I don't want to throw it away, so I'm going to do something with it. And I was calling them trash to treasure yarns.
Yeah.
And then a friend of mine said, are you kidding me? These are like treasure to treasure. So we just call them treasure yarns now.
I love that now. Yeah,
So,
I've called them like kitchen sink yarns.
Yeah,
but
kitchen sink.
Now I know why. I love it.
Exactly.
Called treasure yarns. So Joyce gave me a really quick demonstration of how to do this on your last visit, which we spun from an art bat.
Yes.
That we carded up, and I was just all in. And I want you to know it's such a good time, and you're gonna want to do this. So we all have collections of fibers around from past projects, and some of you already store them by color or color families, which is how we begun this process, by sorting and separating all kinds of yarn bits and lock bits.
Little things, little just whatever leftover pieces are there. I actually have some old yarn that's in here that I didn't like, and it got ripped off. There's some ribbon, there's little bits of lace, there's a felted ear in here somewhere. I have another one that had an eyeball, a little felted eyeball. So, you know, whatever gets left over, it doesn't get lost, it gets made into yarn.
Right. So to start this process, the first thing we did was kind of sort our fibers, and we spent some time doing that in whatever color families or themes are important to
just
you.
Kind of start off and kind of group different, you know, things together, like the greens or the earth family, or like ivories and taupes and browns or neutrals, and just kind of pull them all together so that you have, you know, a little kind of progression. So it's kind of like, it's randomly not random.
Exactly.
So it looks random, but it's really more thought out than that. And you can really have smooth transitions.
A little more coordinated.
A little more coordinated.
So a little bit pre-planned.
My brain kind of just picks onto the color I like, and then it goes to the next color, and it has this transition from, like, you know, earthy browns to greens to blues.
Right.
You know, and then it'll start to just pick up whatever.
Exactly.
And you can arrange them however you want.
So we started by making those collections and then fluffing out the fibers a little bit by hand.
Yeah.
We created these individual fluff piles, and then we did some hand carding.
Yeah, the hand carding is really good because it can really, like, I carry things around a lot, so the thing, if you've carried around some roving, you'll know that it gets compacted or gets felted, and just fluffing them up on your hand cards makes everything really loose, and that way it's easier to draft and to keep it going in that direction.
Right. So Joyce kind of grabs a big handful and feeds it onto her one card or paddle, however you like to refer it to, and then cards them together. And I kind of like to place mine onto a paddle a little bit, like plan that little arrangement and then hand card them. But there's not a whole lot of blending going on there.
No,
it's just kind of a cohesing the fibers and fluffing them up together.
Mostly it's about making them kind of loose and fluffy, and you're I think of it as pre-adding some air into it.
Right.
And, you know, that way you can get these really lofty, a lot of coarse spinning is all about adding more air into things.
So we made all of our fluffs before going to the spinning wheel. So the things you're going to need for this, of course, are your leftover bits. Some hand cards are really helpful. And if you're wanting to make bats, we have the separate video on carding from the art bats. And then you're going to need a spinning wheel. Joyce brought her Kromsky. We also have the Country Spinner 2, and we also have the e-spinner, which you can get with the jumbo, which is what I use as well. But really what you need is a spinning wheel that's going to have a large or a jumbo bobbin and a very large orifice.
A big orifice so that you can get these really chunky baubles through there, like this little guy right there. And even then, you're kind of like guiding it.
Yeah. You really got to be able to handle that fluffy girth in order to do this process. So let's jump into making these treasure yarns. For this yarn, we've chosen to make a core spun yarn, which means we're going to take these fluffs of fiber and we're going to spin them around an inner yarn. We're using a brushed mohair yarn, which we carry, and this is what we're going to use for the inside. But in order to start spinning, you need to tie a leader yarn onto your bobbin, and Joyce is going to talk us through getting that started.
So you want to secure your leader by tying it onto your bobbin, and then you can either do some kind of knot to keep it there, or you can, I like to tape it in place with a little painter's tape, and then you're going to feed it through your rings or hooks, and then ultimately pull it through the orifice so that when you're spinning, it will feed through and wind on to the bobbin. So when you get started, you're going to slip the end of your core yarn into your leader, fold it in half, and start your spinning wheel going in a clockwise direction. You hold that core firmly in your left hand and allow it to build up a little bit of twist, and then you're going to take with your right hand, grab your first handful of fluff, and allow the fluff to naturally grab onto the core and wrap itself around. Let that brushed mohair from the core grab onto those fibers. You're trying to get, a lot of air into there so that you can have some impressive baubles, but you can control that as you start to spin, and you'll see what I mean as I go along. I like to hold my core yarn in my left hand to control the twist, and then feed the fluff on with my right hand. If it's more comfortable for you to do it the opposite way, then by all means you can do it that way. I'm feeding fiber on, allowing the momentum when I let go for it to wind on and pull onto the bobbin. The whole time my feet are not stopping treadling. I'm not stopping at all, but I'm controlling what is going on with my right hand. Pinch the core, draft the fluff, feed onto the core, and allow it to pull towards the orifice. Pinch the core, draft the fluff, feed on toward the orifice.
So you're keeping this downward angle?
This downward angle, and I'm keeping the fluff at a right angle. So the fiber is drafting on at as much of a right angle as you can possibly get. If you find yourself leaning too far back and it's building up and not drawing on, remember that you can kind of stop, slow down, and then wind on by hand if you need to, because sometimes the fiber will get kind of hung up on the hooks and things.
So they want to move the fiber onto the bobbin.
The fiber must go onto the bobbin, otherwise you start to build up a lot of wild twist down here, and that's not good for your core thread, will break.
Right, and they can stop treadling. If you lose kind of control, stop treadling.
You can always stop treadling. It's helpful for new spinners just to treadle for a while to find their rhythm, even if they're not doing anything. So, because your feet have their own rhythm, it's a little bit like walking, chewing gum, and talking at the same time.
Right.
There's a little bit of a kind of a learning curve to get that all flowing in the right direction.
Right. So like this spinning wheel has different speeds, which if you get the Country Spinner 2, you'll have the booklet. It'll show you, and this currently is set to slow. And if you're using the e-spinner, you have a dial. Yeah. So you can set the speed, and then you can click it, and you click it on and off so that you don't have to adjust the speed all the time. You can go right back to the speed that you were comfortable working.
The ratios.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really awesome. And so we're using kind of a downward angle from our orifice. We're feeding our fiber from the right, and it's really
at a right angle.
at a right angle, or from, it could be from the left. I like to feed from the left myself. And we're just letting it go on all fluffy and wild, Joyce. It's so beautiful to watch it feed on.
This core has like these little, it's like a mohair core, so it's really grippy, so it's grabbing onto that fiber, and that fiber just wants to naturally spin around it. So I'm just kind of guiding this fiber, and you can control the air by how much you let go on here. So if I wanted it to have a big poofs, I just allow this whole thing to spin on there, and then I'll have a giant poof. If I want it to be smaller, you just kind of control it a little more, and press with your finger will keep it, you know, more narrow. See how controlled this little bit is right here. And then you just grab some more, start the wheel again, and allow that just to, all those little curls just to grab on. Sometimes the locks will open up when they're, after you spin them and wash them, they'll come back and they'll retain their like texture and curliness. If you had long locks, you could just spin a tiny bit in here and then leave it hanging out, like a little, and see how it spins around there. So all these nice pre-carded fibers, you've already put air into them. That lends itself to what we're doing. So I was talking about how you can shape it with your hand, and we did a little bit of that when we were just regular core spinning from the bat. So with this, even more, you can kind of smooth it out with your hand. You can draft it so that it's like, it had a big length of silk where it was really thin, and I just drafted that on almost like a regular core spinning.
Right.
You know, try to grab a lot of texture so it throws a lot of texture on there, so it's all getting wound up. And, you know, the thing that makes this yarn interesting is actually having interest. So you need to have, you know, interesting textures and things to throw up on there.
Right. We have MC1, we have wool, like
Locks
medium batting,
and
locks,
there's
silk fibers,
all kinds of
tussin,
sparkle
yarns,
and different things and
fabric.
leftover pieces.
Now, each time you grab a new fluff, then you stop treadling. If you need that
Yeah,
to
if
go,
you need
if you need to
to,
select
yeah.
stuff, like sometimes you have to stop treadling.
Yeah, you have to
pick your new.
I kind of had all mine lined up so that I could go continuously from I knew what colors I wanted to go. Now, if you were randomly trying to choose, then it's just, then you can stop more and choose differently, or kind of like go from different colors to different colors. So if you have a really big bauble that you are trying to guide through there, you may need to stop and pause and actually guide it on by hand. You can get caught up on the yarn guides a little bit and pull it through. Otherwise, you might want to kind of shape it as you go. When you have lots of locks and things, you want to stretch all those out and make sure that those get spun around the core properly. You know, they look really puffy, and then once they go through the orifice and stuff, they start to kind of calm down a little bit. Add this little bit of yarn, so I'm just going to make sure it's pushed against the core and give it a go. Trap it. And now it's in there.
here it looks like you're actually tying on a piece of fabric. This is some
Yes, this was like
velvet.
a little piece of velvet, and I took my scissors and cut it, and then kind of just laid it into the wool, and then allowed the wool to go around it. So it's going to get kind of tied on there. And then when I plied it, it really got locked in there because the thread went around it and locked it in. So like these little weird bits of yarn, think of them as like how you would add in, silk waste or something like that. Because you just want them to kind of grab hold, and they're better with something kind of fluffy. So that yarn is just now incorporated into this other yarn.
So our goal in this process is to cover our core yarn with all of these magical fluffy bits that we've created.
Super fun.
Yeah, super fun. And I had a lot of fun making mine. Now mine is a lot tighter than yours, so I want to learn how to make it more fluffy like yours as well.
But this is so pretty because this is really, I think this is really usable because you could knit with this or you could crochet with this. It would be super fun in like a hat or a trim on something or a weaving, whereas mine's like so big and fluffy, you probably all have to use this unless like a weaving or
you get
an
to
embellishment.
I think you get to. These
you have to.
They're so fun.
Or I've been known sometimes to just wear these because
oh yes, me too.
and just wear them as big chunky
well,
scarves.
in the shop, people always want to know if they can buy them, and my answer is always no. But now that you're teaching me to spin, maybe I'll be able to say yes. Okay, so we're just going to keep working our way through this entire pile, creating these big, chunky, funky bits until we get to the end. Joyce, what do we do when we get to the very end
so when I get
of
to the
our
end,
fiber?
I just like to stop spinning and tie a little overhand knot. Sometimes I put like a little slip knot in there, just so I know where the end is, and it may kind of like lose a little tension and unravel a little bit, but it's not going to be a big problem. A lot of times when people are spinning yarn, you expect to lose like maybe the first few inches of it.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
I've always wondered about that. Okay,
yeah, it's not
cool.
going to not all of it's going to be perfect. So, you could also go down and just spin a little regular single for a while.
Right, I've seen that
people
too.
do that too.
So you can terminate the core and then spin another foot or so of a single and kind of seal the core in there.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. All right, so now we've done that. We've got this big, loaded, beautiful bobbin, just put that on a shelf. But besides just keeping it
I loosen the tension on my bobbin. And a lot of times when I have really big yarns like this, I won't want to like take the bobbin off and spin it from my Lazy Kate or whatever. I'll just loosen the tension and then wind it into a big ball.
Okay, into a big ball. Right. I did that too because that's what I saw you do. So I just put it in a big ball.
It's just it's easy. You can just grab that ball and then ply it with something else. In this case, we're just going to ply it again with what we used.
The same yarn.
Because it's kind of neutral and it blends in and it goes with everything.
Plying it is to basically spin it
in the opposite
with another
direction.
yarn
Yes.
or thread. We could use a polyester thread or some other kind of interesting thread. I've seen you use some really unique things. But we're going to use the same mohair yarn and spin it now in the opposite direction.
And this causes the tensions. They kind of like
offset
and marry together. They meld together, just like if you were doing like a twist. If you've ever twisted your hair, you're twisting in the same direction and then twist together in the opposite direction. So the tension is like released into itself and causes it to lock together.
Love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we start the very same way. We've got our same leader on our bobbin.
The same way.
We're going to now take our ply yarn and our handspun.
Yes. And I put the ply on the other side of my body just so I can better control it. You just don't want them to get tangled up. Sometimes if they're on the same side, they'll get a little bit tangled up or kicked over, and depending on how much tension your yarn has, it can start to grab onto that.
They intertwine on their own.
Tangled, yeah.
Right, okay. So we're going to go the opposite sides of our body, and now we're going to spin in a counterclockwise.
Yes. And then as you're plying these together, this time the angle is not so much at right angles, but you're trying to keep them at a 45-degree angle so that they marry together until you want like some big beehives or bobbins. Then you can do a more right angle, 90-degree angle, and push them up as you go.
Right.
This core was a little sticky, so it was a little tricky to push them up. I just set them next to each other and they lock into place.
Okay, so you're intertwining them at a 45-degree angle.
And see how I'm kind of holding my finger to kind of guide it at that angle as well when it's plying together.
Got it. And this goes much faster because it's just this continuous unreeling of the ball.
Yeah, it's very meditative and things. And I just kind of mostly thought, where's my biggest, chunkiest places, and made them bigger and chunkier.
Accentuate them. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and you can kind of lock them down with your ply yarn by wrapping a couple of times right at the base of that. Yeah, I love it. And then same like before, when we get these great big baubles, we just pause and manually feed.
My yarn guides always want to get hung up with the tiny threads and stuff.
Right, and we use our yarn guides to control the distribution of the yarn onto the bobbin.
Yeah. When you're doing traditional spinning, it's a little bit more important because those bobbins are smaller and a lot lighter, and the heaviness of the yarn makes a difference. So you want to make sure that gets evenly distributed. It just helps with the spinning.
Now, what happens when we just get a little wrapped up? Can you explain
when you get a
this
little
for
wrapped
us?
up, you just can go a little bit backwards on your, go in the opposite direction and unspin a tiny bit, or you can kind of pull it so that it unspins and then allow it to go at the proper angle, and you'll kind of get the feel of that. It's when it wraps up in the wrong way, it's more of like you'll see the angle of the yarn change, and then it's not slanted the way it should be.
Gotcha. So it should kind of be at a slant, like those swirly suckers we used to get when we were a kid.
Exactly.
I got it. I really like how the ply yarn even takes the biggest, loftiest bits and sort of divides them up into this uniform.
The spiral is really versatile. Like that's kind of the most common kind of ply, the spiral ply. And it just makes it into these beautiful little segments and really gives it like a, kind of a more finished look.
That's lovely. Yeah, it's so fun to do, isn't it? It is so
very fun.
Meditative. And now if we need to pause and go turn off the rice or something.
Exactly.
Or take the dog out, then you just kind of, when you stop treadling, but too, you just park your yarn wherever it'll stay put.
Yeah.
Like I wrap mine under my tension knob.
Exactly. I have a little tension knob and I just wrap it around here too.
Perfect. Just park it so that it's
not
pinching for
unraveling.
you.
Yeah,
right.
It's not unraveling when you leave it alone.
Right, and you can just come back to it. Yeah, that's perfect.
The nice thing about the Ashford Country Spinner is that it has such a big orifice so that you can get the biggest of baubles through there. I like treasure yarns because they are just a good way to use up all of your things that you thought were going to go to waste. If you have any extra pieces of projects or even like little parts of bats or old classes or old, whatever it is, you can gather it all together and make this incredible thing that otherwise would just lay not being used.
And what are some of the ways you like to use them?
I actually just mostly make them for the pleasure of making them. I have been known to wear them as like a chunky scarf, and sometimes I'll use them in my weavings, or I'll take like little pieces of them and use them in some wet felting project, or when I made my dress at the felted dress class, I laid handspun yarn all the way down the front of my dress. So I used some handspun yarn that way. Whatever you want to do with them.
You can use them for doll hair.
You can use them totally for doll hair. It's great. When we made the crowns, I took some yarn that I had made and I wrapped the crown in it when I was doing the fairy lights. So that was another way to use them.
Very fun. Maybe we can work them into another project that we'll get up to later in the year.
Sounds exciting.
I love it. And again, we use fine fibers like fine merino tops. We used fine silk tops and Tessa silk tops. We used MC1 batting and other just locks and
locks, alpaca, little bits of random things like felted bunny ears and lace and velvet and
ribbons and string.
Yeah. Old yarn that didn't quite make it anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And just build up all the texture.
Love it. They're beautiful.
This would be really cool to like edge some kind of like picture frame with or something like that if you were going to do a felted picture, and then you could sew or knit this along the edge.
Wow.
You know? Like sew it on just like as is, like
very
chunks.
cool. Yes. Mm-hmm. Beautiful. We're going to apply the whole thing, and when we get to the very end, what do we need to know?
So I just stop and have a little bit of extra just plain core right there and allow it to, cut it off so that I have a little bit of extra in case I needed to tie on to the Niddy Noddy when I wind it off.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So once we're all finished, now to get it off our bobbin, when you're ready to take it off our bobbin, we're going to wind it onto the Niddy Noddy, which the Niddy Noddy is like, helps us make a skein.
Exactly.
Right? Winding it onto the Niddy Noddy is an interesting process.
I hold mine in my left hand so that I don't get confused if I transfer the other hand. And you're going to tie it off. I always tie it off to like the nearest one on the right. It looks a little bit like an anchor, the whole shape of it. So you want to bring it down, around, and then over, and then up again, and then over. And I'm never going to have to move my left hand. That's how I know I'm doing it correctly. Because you don't want to get confused in how you're wrapping it, because when you take it off, it'll be all tangled.
Right. So what you notice is that the headstalks, if you will, are turned perpendicular to each other. And this allows you to wind on without it being twisted.
And if you were traveling with it, you could turn it and lay it flat. But yeah, this way you just hang on to it and you develop this kind of pattern of wrapping. And that will make a lovely skein for you.
Right. And so once we have all of our yarn wound onto the Niddy Noddy, then we're going to tie it in place.
In place with, I like to use a little bit of fancy sari silk ribbon just because I figure it looks different than my yarn, and sometimes these yarns get so mixed up it might be hard to figure out what is your little infinity loops. We split the mass of yarn, and it doesn't matter if it's even or not. You just want to put your ribbon in there or yarn and wrap it around into an infinity loop and then tie it off.
Right. I call it figure eight.
Figure eight.
So we just divide it roughly in half. And tie it 3 or 4 places. Yes, we're going to tie it off in 3 or 4 places. And so now we have a skein that we can control.
Yes.
And move on to the next stage, which is to set our yarn.
We're going to set the yarn by washing it in some hot water. It doesn't have to be like crazy hot. Whatever comes out of the sink is sufficient, You can put a little half tablespoon or teaspoon of wool wash or some other kind of conditioner, something very mild. You might not need any at all. If there's any dust or anything that's been gathered in there, and sometimes these scrap pieces can have a little bit of residual dirtiness or something like that, and it just washes everything.
Yeah.
And you're just gonna set it in there almost like you're washing wool.
Like soaking.
Yeah. Just soak it in there.
Yep.
Let it soak for like 10 minutes. That's could be even too long. So the hot water soak with a little bit of wool wash, and then a cold water soap with like your finishing rinse and a little glug of vinegar to kind of neutralize that soap from before.
Mm-hmm.
And that also can just be 10 minutes tops, and then you'll spin out the water and hang it to dry.
Yeah. I spun mine out. And then, Joyce, what do you like to do? Like, I just did a snap. Just snapping.
A snap is totally sufficient,
Mm-hmm.
You don't really need to, some people whack it against the wall.
Yeah.
I would save that for if you were spinning like an Angora yarn or mohair yarn.
Okay.
That actually helps make it bloom. If you're spinning like Angora rabbit fur, that blooms, or mohair will bloom the yarn. But this one is just like hang it to dry and it's ready to go.
So this is the one that I made after your quick
So
tutelage.
pretty. I love
Oh,
it.
thank you. So I asked for your feedback. So how would you tell us to kind of evaluate our yarn?
So you want to make sure we always want to make sure if it's balanced is the goal of any yarn. So you just hold it up and you see if it has a major twist in it. That might say it's overspun or it didn't quite balance, but this one is perfectly balanced. So good job. Compare it to this one, which hasn't been washed yet.
Right.
So this one see how it still has a little bit of a twist in there, and that'll kind of work itself out but ultimately it's still hanging almost even. It's just got a little bit of a twist in there, but this will even out when we wash it.
Love it. Super exciting. Joyce, it's been so fun spinning with you.
Thank you
I don't
for
want you to
having
go.
me.
I do. Let's just sit and spin and have a cup of tea.
It's a really relaxing thing to do. It's super fun to spin with friends. It's one of my favorite things ever.
I just wish you lived closer.
I wish there wasn't so much traffic in between.
I know. We need a helicopter.
Yeah, exactly. Like a drone. Just carry me there. Yeah.
Well, I've been having a lot of fun spinning. I really wanted to introduce you all to it. And Joyce, thank you so much for coming and sharing with us. So I hope you guys will give us a go, give us a call, let us know how we can help you get started. If you haven't checked it out yet, check out the video with Joyce on spinning an art yarn from an art bat. Super duper fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, y'all. See you next time.